Hey guys, welcome back to Follow Me 11B. Discussions on current events, macroeconomics, and freedom and liberty from a veteran's perspective. Today I wanted to discuss if the United States of America is turning into the Chinese States of America, as in the Chinese Communist Party. Now, to kick things off, let's go straight to a news article I came across in CNBC entitled, Chinese Company's Purchase of North Dakota Farmland Raises National Security Concerns in Washington. It's by Iman Javers, Javers. It's from July 1st, 2022. And it starts off like this. At first glance, the largely barren, wind-swept tract of land just north of Grand Forks, North Dakota, seems to be an unlikely location for international espionage. There's not much on the more than 300-acre patch of prime Dakota farmland right now other than dirt and tall grasses, bordered by highways and light industrial facilities on the outskirts of the city. The nearest neighbors include a crop production company, a truck and trailer service outfit, and Patio World, which sells landscaping supplies for suburban backyards. But when three North Dakotans who owned the parcels of land here sold them for millions of dollars this spring, the transaction raised alarm bells as far away as Washington, D.C. That's because the buyer of the land was a Chinese company, the Fufeng Group, based in Shandong, China. The property is just about 20 minutes down the road from Grand Forks Air Force Base, home to some of the nation's most sensitive military drone technology. The base is also home of a new space networking center, which a North Dakota senator said handles the backbone of all U.S. military communications across the globe. Now, some security experts warn the Chinese corn milling plant should be stopped because it could offer Chinese intelligence unprecedented access to the facility. It's an only in America type of fight, pitting the property and economic rights of a community against national security warnings from high-ranking officials in the nation's capital. Debate over the project has roiled the small community, with emotional city council hearings, local politicians at odds with one another, and neighborhood groups gearing up to block the project. And we can skip that next section. Here's a little bit about Gary Bridgeford, who sold his parcel of farmland to the Chinese company for around $2.6 million this year. And he's talking about his neighbors are opposing it, and he's been threatened, says he's been threatened. He's called every name in the book. But skipping down a paragraph or so, Bridgeford says he believes the national security concerns are overblown. Quote, how would they gain any knowledge of this base? He asked. It's about 12 miles away. It isn't like it's next door. Just a sidebar. When I was in the Iraq War in 2006, there were reports that we had to monitor everything that went out across the radio net because Iranian intelligence was monitoring our transmissions. So you don't necessarily have to be right next door to intercept transmissions. But I digress. Quote, people hear from the China stuff and there's concern, Bridgeford said, but everyone has a phone in their pocket that was probably made in China. Where do you draw the line? Good question. The city's mayor, Brandon Bochensky, said he just wants to do business. The proposed $700 million plant would create more than 200 direct jobs and other opportunities for logistics, trucking, and other support services. Let's see here. Here's a quote from him. The mayor, that is. I mean, we're a municipality of about 60,000 people, he said. You know, we don't have the budget to have an intelligence gathering apparatus here. Skip to the next part. Among those partners that he works with is the United States Air Force, which hasn't taken an official position on the Chinese project in its North Dakota backyard. That's interesting. However, but inside the Air Force, an officer circulated a memo about the project in April, casting it as a national security threat to the United States and alleging that it fits a pattern of Chinese sub-national espionage campaigns using commercial economic development projects to get close to Department of Defense installations. The officer, Major Jeremy Fox, argued that the Fufang project is located on a narrow geographic footprint which passive receiving equipment could intercept sensitive drone and space-based communications to and from the base. Here's a quote. Some of the most sensitive elements of the Grand Forks exist with the digital uplinks and downlinks inherent with unmanned air systems, i.e. drones, and their interaction with space-based assets, he wrote. And any such data collection would present a costly national security risk, causing grave damage to the United States' strategic advantages. I agree. Fox argued that the Air Force would have little ability to detect any electronic surveillance on drone and satellite transmissions being conducted from the Chinese property. Passive collection of those signals would be undetectable, as the requirements to do so would merely require ordinary antennas tuned to the right collection frequencies, he wrote. This introduces a grave vulnerability to our Department of Defense installations and is incredibly compromising to U.S. national security. Still, that's not the Air Force's official position, of course. An Air Force spokeswoman said Fox wrote the memo on his own in an effort to raise awareness of what he deemed concerning with respect to the company in question moving into the Grand Forks area. Skip down to the next paragraph. The company at the heart of the debate argues that its project will help Americans, not hurt them. Eric Gettr, Chief Operating Officer of Fufang USA, the U.S. subsidiary of the Fufang Group, dismissed concerns the plant could be used to spy on the Air Force base. Here's a quote again. I can't imagine anyone that we hire that's going to even do that, Gettr said. When we asked if he could definitively say it wouldn't be used for espionage, he responded, absolutely. We're under U.S. law. I'm an American citizen. I grew up my whole life here, and I am not going to be doing any type of espionage activities or be associated with a company that does. And I know my team feels the exact same way, Gettr said. Sidebar, wouldn't it be interesting if a year from now we could do another interview or another article and just try to interview the same fellow again and see if he's still on the payroll? Just saying. Let's jump down a paragraph or two. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission cited Fox's intelligence concerns in a May 26 report, writing, the location of the land close to the base is particularly convenient for monitoring air traffic flows in and out of the base, among other security-related concerns. Senate opposition. Senator Kevin Cramer, Republican, North Dakota, opposes the project despite the economic advantages it might bring to his own constituents. He said he's suspicious of the Chinese government's intent. I think we grossly underappreciate how effective they are at collecting information, collecting data, using it in nefarious ways, he said in an interview. And I just as soon not have the Chinese Communist Party doing business in my backyard. Both Democrat chairman and Republican ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee also told CNBC they are opposed to the project. The Senate Intelligence Committee has been loudly sounding the alarm about the counterintelligence threat posed by the People's Republic of China, said Chairman Mark Warner, Democrat, Virginia. We should be seriously concerned about Chinese investment in locations so close to sensitive sites, such as military bases around the U.S. Thank you. Now we just have to do something about it. His Republican counterpart, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, agrees, quote, it is dangerous, foolish, and short-sighted to allow the Chinese Communist Party and its proxies to purchase land near U.S. military installations, close quote, he told CNBC in a statement, noting that he is co-sponsoring legislation that would give the Biden administration the power to block such a purchase. Skip down to the next paragraph. The project is a complicated one, and the city of Grand Forks is not expected to begin building out infrastructure for it until next spring, Bochinsky said. He's moving ahead in good faith, but is ready to shift gears if new information comes to light. Here's a final quote. We want to do what's best for the community. We want to do what's best for the country, and it's a difficult balance right now, he said. So getting back to that fellow that we quoted earlier asking, hey, where do we draw the line? It's not like the base is right next door to this parcel of land that the Chinese government wants to build a plant on. Maybe you draw the line with if it's within X amount of miles, or within a military installation or a sensitive installation of any kind. Probably don't allow a sale to them. Sounds like there's some things in motion that might prevent such sales in the future, such constructions in the future, but I don't think it's going to affect this particular plant. But I just want to get to some numbers real quick. Currently, 191,652 acres of farmland are now currently owned by the CCP in the United States. So, not only is this a national security threat, in my opinion, but it's also becoming a national security threat in other ways. Maybe not as obvious, but some of the prime farmland is being snatched up by the Chinese government, making a problem with food chain supply, food and the supply chain even worse. Maybe not by a whole lot right now, but if nothing changes, there's nothing stopping the Chinese government from going to farmers producing domestically and offering them $1 million. Here's a few $1 million for your land. You're getting older and you need a retirement. Here, let me offer you a couple $1 million and we'll take this land off your hands. And we'll do it again and again and again with farmers all across the country. And before you know it, we're going to be in a tight spot. Now, to put that 191,652 acres owned by the Chinese in the United States in perspective, 897,400,000 acres is the total available farmland in the United States right now, and they only own less than 200,000. So right now, in that aspect, I would say it's not a national security threat yet, but it could easily ramp up. One other thing I wanted to touch on too is Fox News citing the Paulson Institute that Chinese firms and investors own controlling interest in nearly 2,400 U.S. companies. Now, the question I guess I want to know is, that I want to answer is the United States of America turning into the Chinese states of America? Well, when China is snatching up tens of thousands of acres of farmland within the borders of the United States, when they own controlling interest in nearly 2,400 U.S. companies, for example, and then the man asks about the cell phone situation. Let's talk about the cell phone situation for a second. And the app TikTok, for instance. TikTok, the video sharing app owned by China's ByteDance Ltd. A lot of people think it's a harmless app, kind of like a YouTube kind of thing or an Instagram. But let's just examine this for a second. Announced by TikTok themselves, certain employees outside the U.S., maybe China, can access information from American users. How is that important? Well, what if one of the users happens to be a congressman or a senator or a member of the presidential cabinet, and maybe they're doing something that they don't want made public? Maybe the Chinese now has access to a high-ranking official that they can use to hold over their heads. Just putting it out there, not saying this is happening, but I just want to get you thinking about what could potentially happen. Also, these supposedly private companies, because 60% of companies in China are state-owned. That means 40% are privately owned. So, in define private-owned, though, in China has its, quote, this is a paper published, a position paper that's the Chinese government's official position. It's called The Opinion on Strengthening the United Front Work on the private economy in the New Era. It was released in 2020, and it's by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. And this document tells us that the Chinese private companies will be increasingly called upon to conduct operations in accord with government policy and objectives and ideologies. So here's a quote from the document. Quote, to better focus the wisdom and strength of the private business people on the goal and mission to realize the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. So if that sounds like privately owned objectives, you got a different definition of private than I do. But that's all for now. I think we've chatted enough about if the Chinese government is doing a slow creep trying to take over sections, portions, farmland, companies in the United States of America. In my opinion, clearly that's within their national interests to do that through espionage or through just plain old buy it up from retiring farmers and so forth. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Please post your opinions and your comments below. And don't forget, we are growing. We are Follow Me 11B on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Gettr. And we are at The Real Follow Me 11B on Instagram and on Rumble. And we will see you all on the next video.